missiles like the UK Storm Shadow, the French Scalp, the US Atacms, which are long-range precision missiles, cruise missiles is how people have mostly heard them referred to in the news. At the moment, the donor community has limited their use to the territory of Ukraine, including Crimea. But all that Russia has done is moved its command and control and its key logistic nodes further rearwards to put them out of the range of Storm Shadow, or to put them back into kind of Russian territory. And what Zelensky is asking is for the UK to show leadership in letting him hit those targets with the weapon systems we provided. We absolutely should.
Volodymyr Zelensky addressing cabinet right now. Well, what will he be wanting, and can Britain and the West deliver it? Well, you can speak now to the former Armed Forces Minister and former soldier, James Heappey, joins us. Hi, James.
Hi, Matt. And former Parliamentary Private Secretary to a Prime Minister as well. It's to touch on your last conversation. Well, that's interesting to appoint somebody who's not been a parliamentarian previously, though, into a job that is all about the art of managing the tea room and parliamentary colleagues. But that wasn't your question.
No. It's interesting, though. I mean, most people would know that the job basically involves sitting behind the Prime Minister and handing bits of paper. But that's the only visible bit.
That's the most visible bit of it. Yeah. Actually, what you are is the conduit for colleagues to number 10. And often it's really mundane stuff. You know, it is, could the Prime Minister sign a letter of congratulation to the leader of the local scout troop after 20 years of service or something? And you're just, linking colleagues to the political office of number 10 to get that sort of thing. But often, and bear in mind, my time PPSing for the Prime Minister was with Boris, July 2019 up to the general election. Sometimes there's some quite challenging moments of parliamentary management, and you need to kind of know how the Commons works in order to go into an appointment like that. I'm sure this guy does, but it seems odd to give it to a brand new MP.
Yeah. I mean, he's been in and around Parliament as an aide, but it's not quite the same as being an MP. Anyway, let's turn our attention to the question of Ukraine. We're just hearing Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Keir Starmer to show your leadership and help Ukraine's long-range capability, saying that if the restriction on Western weapons being used by Ukraine was lifted, it would help Kyiv to strengthen its defence and secure its frontline positions. What is it that Volodymyr Zelensky is wanting, and is it possible for Britain to show the leadership he wants, Jane?
Yes, it is absolutely possible for the UK to show that leadership, and it's no coincidence that it's here speaking to the UK cabinet that he makes that point. We are recognised as a country who, from the very beginning of the war, has been willing to go there first. Others have subsequently gone there in greater volume, but we've always been the first to be willing to go there in terms of provision of different weapon systems. What he's getting after is missiles like the UK Storm Shadow, the French Scalp, the US Atacms, which are long-range precision missiles, cruise missiles is how people have mostly heard them referred to in the news. At the moment, the donor community has limited their use to the territory of Ukraine, including Crimea. But all that Russia has done is moved its command and control and its key logistic nodes further rearwards to put them out of the range of Storm Shadow, or to put them back into kind of Russian territory. And what Zelensky is asking is for the UK to show leadership in letting him hit those targets with the weapon systems we provided. We absolutely should.
And what difference will it make to Ukraine? And what are the risks of going further? I mean, is it actually the case that at various points Putin has drawn a red line and said, well, if another Western country does this, that will be considered an escalation if we do it. And then each time actually we have done it and we haven't seen a major escalation from Putin. So is it just actually a question of calling Moscow's bluff a bit?
100%. And look, that is, if I was given the opportunity to reflect to Keir and his team the lessons that we learned in the first 6 months to a year of the war, is that there is real value in showing Putin that his rhetoric will not deter. And there were moments in that first year where Putin and Medvedev, his prime minister, were rattling the nuclear saber. It was a very sobering conversations in Whitehall about whether or not the things that we were doing with the provision of long-range artillery, tanks, encouraging people to give jets, whether or not we were kind of genuinely going to provoke the bear into doing something incredibly dangerous. But Putin and Medvedev rely on Europe and the West blinking in response to that sort of rhetoric. So Ukraine is always going to ask for this stuff. They are in a war. They need every means possible with which to fight back. We are tying one of their hands behind their backs by limiting the target range that they can prosecute with these long-range systems that the donor community has provided. And no matter what Putin says to try to deter us from making that decision to liberate Ukraine's targeting to include targets in Russia, if that clearly is the next step in providing Ukraine the means to get on the front foot and at least ease pressure from the current Russian offensive, if not in time be able to go back onto the offensive themselves.
Well, we'll see what comes out of this meeting today. James, really appreciate your time today. James Heappey there, former Conservative MP and Armed Forces Minister, former soldier and former PPS. We don't just throw this show together, do we? It's all very good. Right, let's turn our attention to the world of politics now. Times senior political correspondent, Times Radio senior political correspondent, Patrick McGuire's here. Patrick, why is Volodymyr Zelensky addressing cabinet?
Well, he's the first foreign leader to have done so since 1997, when Bill Clinton addressed cabinet. He was obviously at the meeting of the European political community at Blenheim Palace yesterday, and he's going to continue to make the case he was making to European leaders yesterday, i.e., we need more of your money and we need more of your weapons. And John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has been out and about this morning saying that Ukraine will be able to use British weaponry to strike targets in Russia, but their red line is they will not help Ukraine fire those missiles. So a small distinction, but an important one. And I imagine Volodymyr Zelensky will find this probably one of the easier audiences he's dealt with among European leaders this week.
Let's talk about Chris Ward. Let's give the people what they want.
Oh, that's the dream.
So who is Chris Ward and why is his new job significant?
Chris Ward, who listeners may have actually heard in this station, is the first person Keir Starmer, the politician, ever hired. He has worked for Keir Starmer in every job he's done in politics. There was a period after 2021 when Keir Starmer lost the Hartlepool by-election. There was a big period of change in his office. Old friends left, new people, or rather old people from the new Labour years came in and took over. And the mythology of the Keir Starmer project is that only at that point did he win an election. But Chris Ward is the man who worked with Keir Starmer, the politician, in his earliest days, helped plan his leadership bid before it was a glint in anybody else's eye, co-wrote the 10 pledges to the membership, which was sort of leftish and soft Corbynite in their policy positions. And he is a link for Keir Starmer to the past, to a version of himself that is often forgotten about now and is deliberately sort of obscured. And he was this week recalled from obscurity. He's a new MP, but he's been given the job of the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary. So Keir Starmer has the person who knows him better than anybody else who works for him, and also the person for whom the early phase of Keir Starmer, the phase that lots of people in the Labour Party would now forget, is a sort of is an integral part of the Keir Starmer he knows. So it's going to be a really fascinating dynamic. He said in Tom Baldwin, his biographer's book about Keir Starmer, Chris Ward, that his fear was always that Keir Starmer would be taken prisoner or let down by one faction of the Labour Party or another. So it's really striking that Keir Starmer has chosen such a close friend of his who has a certain idea of his politics to be his closest parliamentary aide.
It's really interesting, that, and well worth reading Patrick's column in the paper or online. Patrick, just to bring some breaking news to listeners, apparently restaurants in Parliament appear to have been affected by the global IT outage.
Well, it's fish and chips on a Friday, so that is a real shame for anybody working out of Westminster.
Only accepting cash payments, apparently. So if you're in Westminster, make sure you've got your pennies.
Indeed. I'm trying to think of anyone. The last person I ever saw using cash in the parliamentary canteen was Francis Elliott, the former Times Press editor, now editor of the House magazine. So Francis will be fine today.
We're still trying to just shift all those wheelbarrows of cash in. Patrick, good to see you. Patrick, our Times Radio senior political correspondent.